Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Lebanon-based Hezbollah fire a long-range missile at Tel Aviv for the first time ever. Hezbollah says it was targeting the Israeli spy agency Mossad's headquarters. Russian army advances in eastern Ukraine and captures at least 2 more villages in the Donetsk region. Russia now controls almost 80% of eastern Ukraine. In India, the second phase of polling ends in Jammu and Kashmir. At least 15 foreign diplomats witnessed the electoral process and call it a win for Indian democracy. US President Joe Biden to visit the Central African nation of Angola starting the 13th of October. The 2-day visit will be Biden's first visit to Africa as president. And Uganda launches a major polio vaccination drive to immunize nearly 3 million children under the age of 5. The door-to-door exercise will conclude on the 6th of October. Hello and welcome. We start with the updates from West Africa. Russia has signed a strategic satellite deal with junta-led nations of Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso. As part of the deal, Russia will deploy telecommunications and remote sensing satellites above the 3 West African nations. The technology will boost border surveillance and national security in all 3 countries, which are facing a worsening Islamist insurgency. The agreement comes after ministers from the 3 countries met officials from Russia's aerospace agency Roscosmos in Mali's capital of Bamako on Monday. While the remote sensing satellite will monitor the border areas where militants are active, the telecom satellite aims to facilitate the broadcast of television and radio signals across the countries. It is also expected to provide internet and telephone services to inaccessible and underdeveloped areas. Apart from this, the ministers say that the satellites would help them to monitor and respond to floods, droughts, fires, and other emergencies. Officials have not provided a timeline for the launch of the satellites. However, as per reports, this partnership could be for an initial phase of 5 years. This partnership is the latest sign of Russia's expanding influence in the region. The military-led governments of Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso have turned their backs on the United States and other Western allies who were carrying their counter-terrorism operations in the region. The juntas have instead forged closer ties with Russia. Moscow has provided military instructors, helicopters, weapons and now satellites to the armies to help them in their fight against terrorism. However, some analysts have raised doubts over Russia's ability to combat terrorism in West Africa. The region is reeling from Islamist insurgency linked to the Al-Qaeda and Islamic State for a decade. The armies took charge in Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso with a promise to curb the violence and turned to Russia for assistance. However, West Africa remains a hotspot for terrorism despite the Russian presence. As per reports, since the start of this year, there have been 224 attacks a month on average in the region. The violence has killed tens of thousands in the three nations. Just last week, Al-Qaeda affiliates killed at least 50 armed forces personnel in Mali's capital. This while Russia's Wagner mercenaries were stationed just kilometers away. The three junta nations, which formed their own alliance after withdrawing from the regional bloc ECOWAS, have hailed the Russian satellite pact crucial for their security strategy. Will Russia's latest move keep its edge over Western rivals in West Africa? Now, for more on this, we have with us Paul Melly, Consulting Fellow of Africa Programme at Chatham House think tank. And Paul is joining us live from London. Thank you for being with us.
Well,
what are the primary objectives of this satellite deal between Russia and these three West African countries?
Well, I think you have to look at it from both sides. From the point of view of the Sahelian military regimes, who, as you've explained, they've taken the decision, if you like, to break with the partnerships that before their countries used to rely on, both with their neighbors in fellow members of ECOWAS, as they were, and the partnerships with Western governments, with France, with the US in particular. Now, in deciding to break with those, they then needed an alternative, and it's come in the form of the troops, mainly from the Wagner Company, now known as the Africa Corps, the former mercenary outfit that seems to be now more closely controlled by the Russian defense establishment, if you like. And now with this satellite deal, they're trying to replace the technology that to some extent they have lost through the ending of their partnership, particularly with the US and France, because the US had a big security drones base in the north of Niger, from which it could really get a very good intelligence analysis of what was going on in the Sahara. And that information could be passed both to the French forces, but also to the forces of the Sahelian countries when it was working with them.
Yes.
And so that's what the Sahelian countries are looking for. But on the other hand, you also have the Russians who are looking for a means to extend their influence and to deepen that. One of the criticisms of the Russian approach has been that what Russia really offers is a security deal. And in the case of some countries like Burkina Faso, it's really just a regime protection deal. The Russians are not particularly involved in the battle against jihadist groups there, whereas they are in Mali. And there'd been a criticism, what are the Russians offering beyond security for the regimes? And in the case of Mali, the battle supporting the Malian army. And one dimension of this satellite thing, which is very shrewd, is this idea that it's going to extend television coverage, it's going to improve internet coverage. In other words, tangible things that the populations in those countries will feel. So that's what's in it for Russia, if you like.
Yes. Right, Paul, I want to get onto that in a minute. In the context of the region's ongoing conflicts, how will the acquisition of these satellites impact the ongoing efforts to combat the Islamist insurgencies in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger?
Well, obviously it'll provide some extra aerial intelligence, perhaps. But I think we need to remember these are groups, whether we're talking about the Tuareg separatist groups in the north of Mali, who in late July inflicted a heavy defeat on the Wagner fighters and the Malian army, or whether we're talking about the Islamist groups, the jihadist groups that are moving around in the Sahel, or whether we're talking about community groups, because some of these conflicts have become overlapped, if you like, with long-standing conflicts over land, access to water and grazing and so on. This is very much all these groups are operating as guerrilla groups informally with very light touch, very mobile with motorbikes or small vehicles. So it's not it's not clear how much what you might call high level surveillance by satellites that may originally have been designed, if you like, to pick out big military installations, as we see when we see the coverage of, satellite photos of the battlefronts in Ukraine and so on. How applicable that will be to this very different context in the Sahara and in the Sahel, the arid, scrubby bushland to the south of the desert, where you're talking about often small groups of people moving in the lightest and hardest to detect way. And how far that will the satellites will then be complemented with the sort of drone operations that previously the French and the Americans were offering, that remains to be clear. We know that these Sahel states have been acquiring some drones, but how they will fit with the Russian satellite coverage isn't absolutely clear.
Sure. And going back to what you touched on earlier, what are the expected economic and social benefits for the local populations in these countries from this deal?
Well, where there is no internet coverage, where there's no access to TV, but I think internet's probably more important. Clearly, if the satellite systems, if the technology holds up well enough and they're able to deliver that, that will be an important plus in terms of people's day-to-day living quality. It will allow, for example, mobile banking and communication by WhatsApp and this sort of thing. But it's not as if these countries are totally without modern telecoms already. All people generally, the usage of mobile phones, but even smartphones with WhatsApp and so on is already pretty high. So people have quite a wide degree of access to technology. So it's not absolutely clear what difference it will make. One of the things it may do, though, is bolster Russia's capacity to engage in the information war. The whole social media and media imaging battle that's going on, which is a battle for public opinion in these countries and for shaping perceptions of the outside world. That, of course, technology plays a really critical role in that. And it's an area where Russia's developed a lot of expertise. So whether the satellites will help that could be an important factor.
And how does this satellite deal align then with the broader geopolitical interest of Russia in Africa, particularly in this region?
Well, Russia had been several years, if you step back several years, in a position where it was really seemed to be trying to disrupt or cause a nuisance, if you like, to regions where there was essentially a long tradition of partnership with the West. But it's moved on beyond that now. So now with these three central Sahelian countries, it is trying to actually build a zone of proactive influence. And clearly, the satellite deals are just another dimension, another aspect of what Russia is trying to do in building its partnerships with these countries. We're also seeing a big push on the cultural front, and obviously in terms of weapons supplies and so on. But what we don't yet know is how effective Russia will be on the development side of things, because these are countries that have had a very long-standing, deep development partnership, both with the UN system, but also with Western donors. For example, the largest financier of the Sahel food security early warning system is the European Union. So how Russia will fit with that will be a big challenge, but it also presents a challenge to those Western governments, because they are very acutely aware that the Sahel is one of the poorest regions of the world, and they're anxious to retain relationships. They're anxious not to abandon development progress of recent years. And so at the moment, we're in a situation where a lot of the key Western donors are trying to maintain development support for the Sahelian countries to help ordinary people in rural communities and that sort of thing, while obviously having their political relations currently in the deep freeze.
Absolutely. Paul, thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa and for your valued insights on all the latest coming out of the Sahel region.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Bye.
India's very own Unified Payments Interface, or UPI system, which is emerging as a new global leader in digital payments, may soon see similar success in Africa. India is in talks with several countries in Africa to help them build a UPI-like digital payment system. The National Payments Corporation of India, or the NPCI, which runs UPI, is reportedly in talks with at least 20 nations in Africa and South America to build a similar system. Though the authority has not revealed the names of all of the nations, it signed a deal with Namibia in May to help it build a real-time payment system. Rwanda is another African country with which serious discussions in this regard have happened, as per the NCPI officials. India is keen on sharing its UPI expertise with the world after the system's huge success domestically. Before delving into the success story, let us first explain to you what UPI is. It is a real-time payment system that allows seamless money transfers from one bank account to another, instantly and free of charge through mobile phones. Users can make payments by simply using a virtual payment address or scanning a QR code, and this eliminates the need to share sensitive bank details. The convenience of this method has revolutionized the digital payments in India. The country now leads the world in digital transactions, with reportedly over 40% of payments being made digitally. As per the NCPI, there were nearly 15 billion UPI transactions in August. From street vendors to large shopping malls, today UPI is used by everyone, everywhere in India. Now, India's seamless digital transaction method has gained traction globally. The list of nations that have accepted the UPI system is growing. These include countries like the United Arab Emirates, Mauritius, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, to the UK and France. And now India wants to take this revolutionary digital payments technology to even more nations.
UPI is already present in many countries through QR code and through connectivity, the fast linkage of fast payment systems. Discussions are already going on with with several countries. We hope it will. We expect this to grow further in several other countries in the future.
For Africa, a UPI-like system could not just bring convenience, but it could also bring financial inclusion and economic growth. Such a system can ensure easier access to financial services for millions. It can also encourage a more robust, digitally empowered economies for these nations, particularly in Africa. Shifting focus to Nigeria now. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has directed law enforcement agencies to intensify efforts in cracking down on individuals involved in trafficking stolen vehicles. In a statement by the President's Special Advisor on Information and Strategy, Bayo Onwagu, the Nigerian leader said that the country will continue to work with its international partners to ensure that organized crime groups involved in transnational car thefts are deprived of the benefits of their activities. The president acknowledged the recent handover of 53 vehicles and $180,000 to Canada. This after 2 Canadian citizens became victims of transnational car theft and cybercrimes by Nigerian nationals.
Nigeria is not a destination for stolen vehicles and a haven for illicit wealth from foreign countries.
President Tinubu said that his administration remains committed to tackling money laundering, cybercrime, and other financial crimes. President Tinubu also stressed on the importance of preserving seized assets for the benefit of the victims of organized crime, in line with legal frameworks and global conventions. The Nigerian leader also directed all of the relevant agencies, particularly the anti-corruption agencies, to protect the country's economic and financial integrity from organized crime infiltration. Now, in February of 2024, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau listed Ghana and Nigeria as destinations for stolen vehicles from the Greater Toronto area. About 105,000 cars were stolen in Canada in 2022. That is one car stolen every 5 minutes, resulting in about $1 billion in costs to Canadian insurance policyholders. Ottawa says that most of the stolen cars ended up either in parts of Africa or West Asia. In recent years, Canadian police have arrested several people accused of shipping stolen vehicles to Nigeria and Ghana. The scourge of car theft has prompted Canada's Insurance Bureau to declare it a national crisis. Nigerian President Bola Tinubu says that he is committed to acting against criminals involved in transnational car theft. But are these efforts enough to prevent automobile trafficking in the country? Now, it remains to be seen how Nigeria will crack down on the syndicate of transnational car theft. And finally, to our special segment, Resurgent Africa. Amid the coups and the crises, there are many positive stories from Africa that often get overlooked, but not on this show. Our story today is from the southern African nation of Zimbabwe, where climate change-induced droughts are threatening the livelihoods of the country's farmers. But the growing demand for the baobab fruit has given them a new ray of hope. The gigantic baobab trees, also known as the upside-down trees, are native to the African continent. The United States, the European Union and China are importing the baobab fruit in large numbers due to its nutritional qualities. The rising demand has turned this into an opportunity for the farmers in Zimbabwe. Our next report gets you more.
Climate change is a global threat, but some countries face nature's fury more than others. The southern African nation of Zimbabwe is one such example. Climate change-induced droughts have deprived the citizens of Zimbabwe of their staple diet. The drying basins have decimated corn and millet crops in the country, and this has affected the farmer community the most.
We didn't harvest any crops this year. We are only able to survive because of the money from baobab fruits. We are only able to buy corn and salt only. Cooking oil is a luxury because the money is simply not enough. Sometimes I spend a month without buying a bar of soap. I can't even talk of school fees or children's clothes.
However, a native tree called baobab has come to their rescue. Much to Zimbabwe's luck, the popularity of baobab fruit is growing worldwide. The fruit is rich in vitamins and minerals. It also helps in reducing inflammation and balancing blood sugar levels. The hard-shelled fruit from the ancient trees cannot be cultivated. It can only be foraged, as it takes 20 years for a tree to start producing fruit. These fruits are collected by the baobab pickers and then sold to industrial food processors or their middlemen. Sometimes the middlemen also offer cornmeal in exchange for buckets of the fruit.
The fruit is in demand, but the trees did not produce much this year. So sometimes I return home without filling up a single sack. The prices are extremely low sometimes. Buyers offer 50 cents to $1 for a 5 kilograms bucket. I need 5 sacks to buy a 10 kilograms packet of cornmeal.
Baobab has consumers across continents. The US legalized the import of baobab powder as a food and beverage ingredient in 2009, while the European Union approved baobab imports in 2008. The EU, US and China together account for baobab powder's biggest markets. According to the Dutch government, the global market for baobab could reach $10 billion by 2027.
When you go to most countries, they've actually been able to establish a commodity exchange. I think that actually helps in terms of ensuring that there is fair valuation of those commodities, and that the ordinary farmer or the women and children who are actually collecting these baobabs don't get shortchanged at the end of the day. Because currently, it's really the people that are actually buying with greater leverage, because there is no market to determine issues of pricing of those baobabs.
The presence of gigantic baobab trees in abundance in the rural areas of Africa has turned the region into a vital supplier of the fruit. These trees are found from South Africa to Kenya to Senegal. According to government export agency Zimtrade, Zimbabwe alone has about 5 million baobab trees. Zimbabwe's food processing plant is a reflection of the growing industry. Inside the plant, the baobab pulp is bagged separately from the seeds for various uses. Meanwhile, outside the factory, the hard shells are turned into biochar. This ash is given to farmers to make organic compost, which improves soil fertility. Zimtrade is now also looking at partnering with rural women to set up more processing plants. For drought-hit Zimbabwe, baobab has found new meaning. It is a means of survival. Yet the people of Zimbabwe don't keep all the baobab fruits for themselves. They leave the smaller fruits for wild animals like baboons and elephants, continuing their age-old tradition in a fast-changing world.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for